There's one thing this city's taught me. You can put a price on anything. Secrets, reputations, a life. And trust? If you have to ask, you can't afford it. But then I suppose none of that matters when you're me. After all, when did I ever pay for anything?
When you talk about stealth titles, games like Metal Gear Solid, Splinter Cell, and perhaps even Hitman are no doubt among the first on your mind, but none of those games define the genre quite like Thief the Dark Project did. Released in November 1998, the first-person stealth title that utilised light and sound as game mechanics was the first of its kind. The stealth genre has changed a lot since then, with many of the top franchises devolving into action stealth games in a bid to court mainstream appeal. Returning after a 10-year hiatus, many are wondering if Thief is also trying to appeal to a new generation of gamers at the expense of its original fans, or whether it's respected its hardcore stealth heritage. Well, first things first, Thief is not an action game. The focus is still very much on quietly pilfering valuables and avoiding guards rather than fighting them, which is a good thing as the combat system is rather clunky and pretty ineffective anyway. So with that said, rather than aiming to please everyone, it's clear that Thief is targeted exclusively at players with an affinity for stealth titles. Fans of cinematic action games need not apply. Thief kicks off with our player character Garrett running into his protege Erin and teaming up with her for a job. Without giving too much away, the mission goes south and Garrett wakes up a year later and embarks on a quest to find out what happened. Disappointingly, the overall narrative just isn't very compelling, nor is it always clear. I'd often be playing through a mission with no idea why Garrett was there or what his goals were. Fortunately then, Thief is primarily gameplay focused, with very few cutscenes to pull control away from the player. So even if you're not following the story, it doesn't really hinder the overall gameplay experience. As a stealth title, Thief holds up rather well. The main missions can be fairly linear, but they are open enough to offer multiple pathways, many of which can only be accessed with the use of additional tools, which can be purchased from a merchant in the city. Thanks to the game's fluid controls and full body awareness, creeping past unwitting guards and darting between shadows feels great. The game retains the light and shadow mechanic for hiding, as well as a series trademark of special arrow types such as rope, water and blunt arrows, which the player can use to access new areas or manipulate the environment to help them remain undetected. Their use feels a little more predefined than in previous games though. This is especially true with rope arrows, as in this game they can only be used on special rope points rather than any surface of a certain material. So here it feels more like you're following a path designated by the developers rather than forging your own. New to the series is a swoop move, which is essentially a short dash used to quickly retreat or move to nearby cover, but it can disrupt caged birds later in the game, which in turn will alert nearby enemies. As this is a game about thieving, snapping up treasures, picking locks and opening up secret paintings to reveal concealed loot is fun, and plundering the entire level of its goodies became something of an addiction. But as the game wears on, it can get quite repetitive. Gameplay remains largely the same throughout the entire campaign, and the few new enemy types introduced later on don't offer a substantial departure from the norm, leaving players with little reason to alter or rethink their strategy. The variety comes from the design of each level and their aesthetics. Missions inside a high-end manor and a swanky brothel are standouts, but it's the haunted asylum mission that's the real highlight of the game. It might not have topped the Cradle from Thief Deadly Shadows, but the asylum is unsettling and pretty damn creepy in its own right. I've even seen a number of people online pleading for a way to skip the level, so it's clear the developers did a pretty effective job. In between chapters, players can explore the city, hunting for secrets or valuables to nick, or tackle side missions which offer bite-sized chunks of gameplay and narrative. Unfortunately, traversing the same rooftops and winding cobblestone streets becomes tiresome after a few hours, and the lack of fast travel to mission start points, combined with the fact that the different areas of the city are broken up by loading screens, means the journey to mission starts is a bit more of a chore than it needed to be. Initially, the dreary medieval city is a sight to behold, and impressive lighting effects and a thick blanket of fog in the air lend themselves to create a fantastically sinister atmosphere. The developers did a cracking job on the visuals, but not so much on the audio. The sound design itself can't be faulted. Things like ambient noise and sound effects for the various tools you use really help immerse you in the world. It's the audio engine and mixing that are pretty poor. Issues include voices desyncing from lip movements during cutscenes, missing sound effects, dialogue being too quiet, and characters in the background all talking at once, making it difficult to hear mission details or whatever else you're supposed to be listening to. But the game also features a number of other annoyances and design oversights. Due to the new context-sensitive peeking being tied to the same button used to pick up items, I'd often find myself diving into cover instead of picking up loot. Issues also extend to the enemy AI. Although serviceable for the most part, sometimes they won't notice that lights have gone out around them or that doors are now suddenly open or closed. And then there's this. When it comes to PC-specific options though, there's nothing but good things to be said here. Thief features rebindable keys with the option for primary and secondary buttons for each action, but also features controller support should you prefer. Its graphics and display options are great also, featuring borderless windowed mode, double and triple buffered VSync, and options to change things like texture quality, shadow quality, screen space reflection, parallax occlusion mapping, depth of field, contact hardening shadows, tessellation, and super sampling anti-aliasing. But I'd avoid that last one for now, as the latest patch introduced a bug that makes the game look a lot foggier with it turned on. You can also tweak the field of view, which ranges from 70 to 110. Where the game really excels though is its HUD customization. You can toggle things like navigation and interaction prompts, waypoint markers, threat icons, the minimap, the health meter, the ammo counter and the weapon bar. You can disable loot from glinting and turn off the highlight that appears on interactive objects in the world. The range of options is outstanding and really deserves to be applauded. The wealth of customization extends to the custom difficulty setting as well. Players can choose to disable quick saves, turn off combat takedowns, decrease movement speed, and there are even options where if you take damage or alert enemies, or kill or knock out anyone, you fail the mission. You can even turn off focus, which is this game's special vision mode that highlights everything of interest, much like every other action game these days. But all in all, it's a bit of a shame really. At its core, Thief is a good game, but it's mired by issues that probably could have been avoided if the development team had polished it a bit more. For every positive like the asylum level or the genuinely excellent selection of options and custom difficulty variables, there's a negative like the AI being a bit dumb or the audio engine leaving a lot to be desired. If you're looking for a pure stealth title, then you won't go wrong with Thief. You'll just be left wishing the development team had gone that little bit further and made it a great game rather than merely a good one. So with that said, if you feel like Thief would appeal to you, the game can be purchased at our shop over at gamingdragons.com.
What?